Very good. I appreciate you listening through the entire process here. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, and then I'll leave ourselves open for questions and thoughts. As we talked about going into the year, we've had a lot of changes with our service delivery model. Obviously, as exampled by Chris's very good demonstration. So one of the primary focuses we're going to have throughout the year at Director Whaler's direction is education. I think it's very obvious that one of the things that we need to do is we need to sit down with legislators and IWD stakeholders and go through this with them. Go through and demonstrate where we are in their communities, where we can be in their communities as we continue to expand, and then furthermore, where is it that we can provide the process improvements that Greg has so amply pointed out. As I talk about the legislative piece, let me first remind folks of what our mission is. Iowa Workforce Development contributes to the economic security of Iowa's workers, businesses, and communities through a comprehensive statewide system of employment services, education, and regulation of health, safety, and employment laws. Sometimes I think when we get into the legislative process, we forget our mission and forget where our core functions are. As it pertains to where we are today, we keep in mind in everything that we do have the governor's objectives in mind, which, number one, first and foremost, is creating 200,000 private sector positions over the next 5 years, or over the next 4 years in a 5-year time frame. Return Iowa to number one in education, increase family incomes by 25%, and decrease the size and scope of government by 15%. One of the most important contributions that we're going to make, obviously over the course of next year and future forward, is delivering a well-trained labor supply, upskilling our Iowans, and then working with our partners across the IWD stakeholders, specifically Iowa Economic Development Authority, as well as the Iowa Department of Education, and many of our other service delivery providers and training providers. The first thing we're going to do probably have is a IWD policy bill, and keep in mind we're at the end of November here, so everything is a rough draft, and so we're passing back and forth information both with our legislative service bill drafters as well as within staff. As many of you know, we're probably going through a series of edits that we're going to be working through. As many of you know, we've moved from to tax table 4, which is very good for our employers. So what you'll see is a policy bill that's helpful not only to businesses but also to individuals as well, keeping in mind specifically on unemployment insurance and benefits how important it is to weed out waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement. One of the things that we hear from employers is their frustration on hearing from folks that utilize our system but perhaps don't utilize an employment opportunity presented to them. So we'll be communicating back and forth on our policy bill to you as it becomes more detailed. And of course, as you remember, the session begins January 9th. A very non-controversial bill we'll have will be an IWD cleanup bill, and this is legislation that would eliminate obsolete language for the Iowa Conservation Corps, the statewide mentoring program, and the new opportunity program, new employment opportunity program. And what those are, folks, are programs that have been renamed or run their course, and quite frankly, it's just a cleanup type of code scenario. The other bill that we're going to be working on, and Joe Burbid may be able to help me out a little bit on this, is an IWD federal conformity bill. And this is going to be legislation to prohibit non-charging for employers when the failure of the employer to provide information to the department results in an unemployment insurance overpayment. 15% penalty is established, and these are the type of provisions that are going to conform to federal law. Joe, did you have anything you care to add to that at all?
No, I think
Come on up here, please.
Ed has pretty much covered it. It's the bill that the President signed October 21st, and it has two provisions. The one is failure to participate by an employer when provided an opportunity which results in an overpayment. We have to charge the employer. And number two, there's a 15% penalty for fraud overpayments, as Ed said. So those are conformity legislation, failure to pass them in the next 2 years could result in loss of funding for administration of UI and loss of the federal offset tax, so additional taxes for Iowa employers, federal taxes.
Thank you.
That's a 15% penalty, then would that be a way to put that for an overpayment?
Right, a fraud overpayment.
Fraud overpayment.
15% of the amount of the overpayment.
Okay.
And that's, whatever the amount finally is, that's the minimum required under federal law. Bearing in mind, this is what we've heard verbally from Department of Labor. We don't have anything in writing yet, but should be getting that soon.
Thank you.
Before I go on to the next bill, one thing that's going to be important for the board of directors here to know, the statewide board, excuse me, is that we do not have a designated policy liaison person. Director Whaler has outlined that we have a team approach, and so the folks at the State House will be Joe, myself, and Carrie Coons. Carrie will spend a good deal of time with written communication back and forth, as she is our communications director. I'll spend some back and forth time interfacing with legislators and other folks, and then Joe, of course, provides the technical expertise on a number of areas. And so, again, we're employing a team approach in 2012. Moving on to the next bill. Commissioner Morrow will have a series of labor division bills that are in rough draft right now. And really what we're trying to do is kind of set a path so eventually some of the functions that are provided in the Division of Labor can be utilized at the virtual access point. Again, that's future forward. But he's also got some language that's going to address different areas, because as you all know, Commissioner Morrow is also the athletic commissioner. So on the boxing and the MMA, there'll be some back and forth there. But again, as that becomes more clear, we'll be working with employers and workers on the Division of Labor. What can you expect from us next year? IWD will continue to adhere to our mission as I outlined. We'll continue to monitor the appropriations process, specifically with regard to the other agencies that we're working with. And they'll also be looking at the Workforce Training and Economic Development Fund, 260Es, 260Fs. And as you know, we're trying to closely link the three agencies to the best that we can. As I indicated before, education is going to be pivotal so folks understand what it is that we've done since July 1st of last year. Let me turn the tables a little bit and talk federal. There's a report that came out yesterday from the National Association of State Budget Offices. That's a mouthful. It's called NASBO. And in that, it's a 50-state survey of which our Iowa Department of Management provided feedback. And across the United States, it is widely acknowledged that state budgets are going to continue to shrink, with the exception of healthcare. Obviously, when the healthcare costs rise, states, Medicaid, Medicare, that's going to continue to rise. But clear across the country, we're going to have continuing shrinking state budgets. When the respective legislators on the call and here in the room go back up to the Golden Dome, they're going to have a lot on their plate working within the parameters of a 2-year budget. Iowa, at this point in time, has a 6% unemployment rate, which, folks, is the 7th lowest in the United States. That's good news, right? Of course it is. But what that also indicates, in a very formula-driven way with the U.S. Department of Labor, we will be receiving less and less federal funding, folks, over the next 2 or 3 fiscal cycles, due in part to the fact that we've got lower unemployment. The other thing, as pointed out by Kelly when he spoke a little bit on our budget situation, is that there's the unpredictable nature of what's going on in Washington, both with Workforce Investment Act funding as well as federal unemployment benefit extensions. So we're sitting here in a scenario where we're looking at what's going to happen with the payroll tax, what's going to happen with the Bush tax cuts, what's going to happen on unemployment insurance. And these are 3 very compelling issues that are in play right now, and all of it has something to do with workforce. The other thing is Director Whaler and I were on a call with a couple of members of the Iowa delegation in Washington just the other day, and we were talking to them and said, you know, what is it that we're doing with flexibility? In Washington, they are giving some consideration to doing block grants to the state on workforce and unemployment. But again, the question becomes, are there going to be clear guidelines on how those block grants go, or are we just simply going to move money to the states and say, here you go, do what you need to do? So that's our job. Pay close attention to that. As I indicated before, federal funding is formula driven. being as fiscally conservative as we can, we do not anticipate a great deal of federal funding coming our way. Despite the fact that we're 75% federally funded, and obviously the state kicks in, we've got to be very careful moving forward. And so that's the mindset that we're in. Director, did I miss anything or any anecdotal?
No, I think you covered it.
Good.
Thank you.
Open up questions.
Ed, you said you're going to be looking at 260 and a half. What do you mean about that? Because that's really not your workforce development.
Sure, absolutely. As you know, it's the Iowa Economic Development Authority, and there's been a working group paying close attention to not only where those dollars are, but also what the return on investment has been on those dollars. Sherry Timmons over there has been working with Director Durham. We have a couple of our own stakeholders in those meetings
So you're
as well.
part of the team. I just
Correct.
thought maybe you were having a bill or something.
No.
We're just part of the team that they use to analyze the effectiveness of the
Right. Two good
dollars.
questions.
If I could speak to that, Senator Counselor, we really appreciated the involvement of the Labor Management Information Division with respect to helping us get a good return on investment review process in place. And they did a pilot with our institution to get the basically the template designed for that. We've now got all 15 colleges identifying sample companies to feed in, so that hopefully when we get a legislative session, we'll be able to see some of that wage gain and return on investment information. We couldn't do that without the support of IWD in that regard.
And
Really appreciate
we
it.
even are just finishing the process of verification with the community college input, as well as we've had some professors from Iowa State, from their economic statistical area, validate the formula and the assumptions in the formula, so that we can say we've done some academic testing besides a good consumer group of testing.
Well, that's good news, because legislators have been looking at that. I sit on the Ways and Means Committee and been involved with the 260 and F programs, and the other is 260C, 18A, and 260G, the whole gamut. And that's part of what we're supposed to be doing, is making sure that the public's getting the best return for their investments. So.
And the goal is really so that there's a common way to measure all those things, so the legislators can then use that information to make their decisions from on all of those programs.
It really is an important tool for someone like me, who's an economic development person. The 260E is extremely important.
I'm a big supporter.
Steve, is that mainly just transparency stuff?
No, not really. I mean, it's really, I put it in the performance metric side of things, not just transparency. The work that the Economic Development Authority is doing in building out a new database management system for the program, I mean, it's now operationalized. We're all 15 colleges in the process of inputting all their active bond issues and agreements for the deadline of December 15th. And that work completed. That'll make all of that information available for the first time in a relational database, so that any of you that have a question regarding any aspect of those programs should be able to go and query it very easily. What we're talking about here is really the ability to evaluate the wage gains of the Iowans being hired into these new jobs being supported through these public investments. What do they earn the year prior to their being hired into the new job, the year after, longitudinal wage gains, longevity in the jobs, those kinds of things. And we spent probably kind of a good year working with the department, with IWD and their team last year, building out some pilots and templates to try to test all of that. I think everybody's pretty comfortable that we've got a pretty good system now that we can start dropping that data into on an ongoing basis and generating information for the legislature and the state agencies and everything.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Well, Deputy Director, I appreciate your overview there. And the only comment I make is you said you're going to take a conservative approach. I prefer a liberal approach. But what I'd like to see, if you could, keep us updated on the ever-changing Promise Jobs partnership with the community colleges and our other providers. Even an hourly update as you get it, and I watch it closely for the Workforce Investment Act. And And again, and I'm concerned overall because as a member of the interim expenditure committee, I see us literally having a $111 million shortfall in the second year of the governor's 2-year budget. So that's going to be real concerning stuff for you and other workforce partners to keep an eye on during the session next year. So if you can keep that information coming, as you know, it'll be greatly helpful out here in the field.
Yeah, very good, Representative Jacoby. I appreciate that.
In that regard, Representative, let me update you on that issue, promised jobs, since I know many people have questions. We just received the data 2 weeks ago, so we have just started to put things into spreadsheets. We have not done any analysis yet, and so that's the next segment of work to do that I imagine will take to do well a couple of months, and then we have a lot of meetings in every region. We committed to come out to every region with our partners and providers and go through analysis and questions and answers and that sort of thing, and so we're still on that timeline to accomplish that.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other important business to come before this group? Yes.
Just one more question regarding ongoing program support. What's your plan in terms of ongoing financial and program support for the deployment of the National Career Readiness Certificate? What's the status of that program at this point?
Well, at this point, we are offering to people that take the test the first time that we will pay for the first test as long as it's administered by our office or a partner who has signed up with us. And so that started, help me with the date. When did we, I'm going to say the 1st of November. So we had a gap between what happened, what closed out at July 30th and the 1st of November. We're considering for somebody who needs to retake a portion of that test. Right now, it's $15 a retake test, and we're considering if a person goes through the training process with work keys and so forth to better be prepared to take the test, and we can demonstrate that they have done that and they are a client of ours, we will cover the second or first retake, which would be a $15 per test. I think there's 3 tests involved with the NCRC. We have not implemented that second phase yet, so right now it does cost a person $15 for a retake.
Is the system now deployed statewide?
Yes. Oh, NCRC?
Yeah.
Let's see. I think we had 2 regions left, did we? Where we were doing.
That seems correct.
Yeah.
So you're getting close.
Yeah.
Getting very close.
Very close.
Other questions?
I just do, on the career readiness, are there data though suggesting how many employers are requiring that, don't require it, or it makes a difference in it?
Well, we have, employers can have a suggested level of participants that they want, at what level for NCRC. My assessment is there's been a bit of a lull in the last 3 or 4 months because of the fact that the test now people have been paid for, and so there was not a lot of continued emphasis on it by our department, and we saw a drastic decline of people actually taking the test and employers interested in having their people take the test or their applicants. But since we implemented this November 1st process, we've seen the numbers drastically rise almost immediately as soon as we announced that in every region that we would be paying for the test again. And the interest level by employers is now rising again, so we'll be able to collect some more data on that for you to share that with you now that we've started it, kind of rebooted it back into being a.
Dave or Francis, any more questions?
Yes, I have one thing, Steve. On that news release that Carrie sent out, on the second page there, we have, there's statistics on there, and I'll be the first one to admit that I'm no statistician and I'm no mathematician, but looks like civilian labor force over October 1st, or October to September dropped by 15,000, and the employment dropped by 11,000. It seems that all those figures can't be negative. We should have some positive figures there. Do you have any information on, data on the 15,000 Iowans that fell out of the workforce, or the 11,000 in employment? Is that part of those folks that we're talking about that are falling through the cracks?
What you're talking about, just so that everybody in the room knows, is when we send out the monthly unemployment release, there's two sets of data in it. There's a set of data that talks about the size of the labor force, and the size of the labor force by federal standards is defined as all of those that are employed or all of those that are unemployed and looking for work. And that gets your overall labor force size. So if you're, and what you're talking about is what we call the discouraged worker syndrome. And it's the individual who's unemployed and has maybe given up looking, or they've stopped looking as much because they don't feel like the jobs that they're looking for are out there in their area. And that's what they call the discouraged worker syndrome. Nationally, they're saying that is a piece of what's going on. And so we can't break that down. We don't have the ability to break that down to a state level and say that that is exactly what's going on. That piece of the information is derived from a federal Bureau of Labor Statistics tracking piece called the community survey. It's done monthly, and we don't control the sample size, the federal government does. And unfortunately, they keep shrinking Iowa's sample size, which makes it even harder to get a verifiable number. But that is what is assumed to be a piece of what's going on there. Now, it's not a guarantee. You also have, at any month in time, transition of people moving from one state to another. The difference in those two sets of data sets that are on that release is the labor force counts where you live. So it counts people that live in Iowa, but they could work in another state. And then the non-farm numbers counts where the jobs are. So the job could be located in Scott County, Iowa, in Davenport, but the person that works in it could actually live across the border in Illinois. So they would be counted in that state's labor force. That's what makes the two numbers a little difficult to mirror up once in a while.
But that's not normal that all those figures are in negative status. I mean, that seems counterintuitive to me, that all those figures would be negative. It seems like you should have one side of the equation ought to be positive, the other side ought to be negative.
Well, we added, if you're talking about going from September to October, we added,
figures that are on the sheet here. So.
yeah. So we added non-farm jobs. So that means we added jobs in Iowa, but the labor force declined. So the size of it declined, but then as a percentage of that labor force, the number of unemployed also declined. And so if you are a discouraged worker, if you are unemployed and you're not looking for work, you are not counted in the labor force.
So that's part of that negative number.
Yes.
Right. So, and that's Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics standards, and that it's done that way so all states are counted the same.
Right. I understand what discouraged worker is. But we can't break that down in.
No. See, we don't count this piece of it. The federal government counts it, and then they mirror it with census data, and we unfortunately don't get access to that information.
What kind of programs do we have to help those types of folks? That's all at the federal level, is it? Or is there state level programs that help?
I'm not sure.
Or does workforce have anything that?
The discouraged worker.
Discouraged worker.
We treat those individuals just like anybody else that would come into for our services. We don't differentiate in that sense. If you are looking for services, we we're going to assist you. That's how the data is collected at the federal level, and that's what they call those individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah, do we have any estimates about how many people will fall off the unemployment rolls if federal government doesn't extend the UI?
We just did that number.
It's about 1,700 a month, I believe.
And
Was
yeah, if anybody didn't hear that question,
1,700.
Ken Sager asked if we had any idea how many people would lose out on unemployment benefits that would have been available if EUC is not extended after December. And Mike Wilkinson said, well, we believe our last count was approximately 1,700 a month.
Is that, Joe, is that pretty close to?
Right, I think we said what, for that quarter, we have the statistics they asked for, and we were talking about 14,000 folks before it was all done for the first quarter of that session, so. We've provided those numbers. We're starting to wind down emergency unemployment compensation because at the end of this month, the program, you don't put anyone new on the program if there's no extension in Congress.
So that's 14,000 for the first quarter?
Yeah, we can get you the numbers. We've got them.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah,
And that,
That doesn't equal 1,700 a month.
No,
yeah,
I
that's 1,700
apologize.
Nah, I don't think it's 17.
That's what we're seeing drop off of
Running out of
third tier, running out of benefits now. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, the question.
Yeah, we can get you those numbers. We can get those for you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none, I'll call for motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Second? All in favor, say aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Representative Jacoby.